which of the SEC teams just simply, probably, most likely can't compete in this free-flowing NIL era that the state of Tennessee has opened up because they sued the NCAA? So let me start with you as we set up the question, and then I want to ask John. It's our official poll question as well. Today's tough question. Where are we now on that, Caleb? Where do we want to go in that direction? What schools do we want to name on the YouTube channel where we would certainly suggest that people vote and hit the like and subscribe button?
So, which SEC school won't be able to compete in free-flowing NIL era? And the answers are Vanderbilt, Missouri, Mississippi State, and other. Post below if it's other. Well, I don't think it's a hard guess which one is just cleaning house of those four. Just absolutely cleaning up in terms of being
John,
unable to compete.
do you want to guess which school is cleaning a house in not having NIL money? I love the way he put that.
When I think about Vanderbilt, and they're supposedly,
How do you know it was Vanderbilt?
allegedly.
Yeah, we didn't say it was Vanderbilt yet, John. What are you doing?
Huh? I thought you wanted.
It is Vanderbilt, John. You're absolutely right, but
Sorry, I was thinking about those, how they are renovating the stadium there, and they've got the cranes in the background. What they should do is take those cranes and just take the stadium down and just pull the whole thing off and just eliminate it. No, Vanderbilt. I mean, well, I don't know why we are even discussing Vanderbilt. There's no question it can't compete.
Yep,
it can't compete in any era, under any rules.
Here's who we have on the board right now. We've got Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Mississippi State. And that's what Caleb and I came up with this morning. So Vanderbilt clearly with 82% of the vote. Which SEC schools can't compete in the free-flowing NIL era? What do you think of our other selections, Missouri and Mississippi State?
Yeah, I agree with that. However, if you have some success, which Missouri's experienced right now, you never know when that might spark a windfall from donors. But just on the face, I would say no. I mean, and certainly not Mississippi State. I also wonder about Kentucky and South Carolina. I mean, think how long they've been in the second division of the SECs for the most part. It's we're doing away with those divisions now, but when you look back on the SEC starting in 1992, Kentucky's never played in the SEC championship game. And if boosters there, if they're going to invest in something in NIL money, it's going to be Kentucky basketball, not football. So I think Kentucky will struggle. And I'm South Carolina. I mean, would you want to spend money on South Carolina football?
Not currently. No, I would not. I would want to spend money on Florida football currently. So there is a flux, Caleb, of these teams can go in and out of vogue. But as far as the standbys, it feels like to me that Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Mississippi State are kind of in their own category. You?
Yeah, I understand what John is saying about Kentucky and South Carolina, but I feel like I see a lane for them to actually be able to compete because, and I get what John says about basketball, but I do believe in the NIL era, a rising tide is going to lift all boats to a certain degree because if a lot is spent on basketball, that's going to generate a lot more revenue to come in, and their fans do show up for football games. Now, let's remember as we're talking about this, fan support matters more than ever because whatever money the school generates from attendance, they don't have to solicit from donors, at which point donors can use that money on NIL to ink athletes on third-party deals or whatever. And I'll say this for Kentucky and South Carolina fans, they show up for football games. And if they have any decent product, they actually show up. Kentucky shows up pretty impressively for a basketball school for football games.
Hey, Caleb, can I piggyback off something you said? I want to ask John about this. Today's tough question brought to you by our friends today at BetUS. College basketball betting home March is here. Get 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. and a 10% gambler's insurance. The link is right below. Make sure you use that so we get credit for that. Again, that's BetUS. The link is right below. 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2K. John, something that Caleb just said, the rising water raises all boats, or whatever that is.
Rising tide lifts all boats in NIL, yeah.
Exactly. Rising tide and stuff. So that's true. But what's the window? How long do you give a South Carolina or Kentucky? Let's assume Vanderbilt's out of the discussion, but how long do you give a South Carolina, Kentucky, Mississippi State to say, I'm worthy of being a part of your 40 to 50 team mega conference? I'm good. Don't worry about me. Just let me be lifted by that rising tide, or whatever Caleb called it. I mean, what's that window look like to you, John? Who can somebody turn themselves into a true NIL competitor because they have more money coming in theoretically from NIL boosters and television?
I think the SEC will always look after its own, and the SEC is a power player here, and it's always been based on it's not there's never been equity in the conference. There are some schools that had to get by with less, much less donor base. So I think that, but the SEC prides itself on tradition, and it prides itself on rivalries. Now, admittedly, some of that has changed, but I still think it wants to keep that. I mean, the SEC, I don't think it cares if some programs are always down.
Well, in a way, they have to be, John, so you can win an easy game or two.
Yeah, but I just think we've seen it. I don't think that will change in the NIL. I think the SEC will carry these schools along. I think it will carry Vanderbilt along.
Okay, so this is interesting. So, Caleb, let me turn this on you. So, John is suggesting that these schools will be in trouble. They'll be incredibly below average for the remainder of their existence, but the SEC won't boot them. I was thinking that it might be a boot thing. Caleb, how do you view this?
It won't be that the SEC boots them. It will be that once this SEC Big Ten alliance happens, that we all see is inevitably happening, where all the top schools join and forces into one super league. Schools are going to break off from that to form a super league, and there will be no conference, or there will be no, I don't think there's going to be an SEC or a Big Ten in 10, 15 years. I think it's going to be one super league with a bunch of the top teams from all the conferences.
Okay, hit that like or subscribe if Caleb just said something hot, because he did. So basically, Caleb just said Vanderbilt will one day rule its own conference, John. Caleb didn't
I tell you what. Yeah, that Southland Conference can be pretty competitive at times.
I think we're talking about, in this new era, as conferences keep getting bigger and bigger, if the SEC and Big Ten form some alliance, at some point conferences are just going to be arbitrary, and there's going to be no point for them. You might as well just have like one super league, negotiate the TV deal, and then just the teams schedule their rivals how they see fit, and then you kind of rotate 3 or 4 random games outside of that, and then just do a schedule strength for the top whatever to play a playoff. I mean, there's really no point for conferences to exist in 10 years if they keep going down this eat or be eaten philosophy. I mean, and so I just don't. The only reason they would is because Greg Sankey and Tony Batiti want to have jobs, and so I think that at that point, I don't think the SEC is going to kick out Vanderbilt. I think you're going to see the Tennessees and Alabamas and the Michigans and Ohio States leave the SECs and Big Tens and form their own super league and just not invite Vanderbilt with them.
No SEC. Paris Hilton, what do you say?
That's hot.
That is a hot take. John, could you see in your lifetime no SEC?
No.
In my lifetime?
Possibly.
In Caleb's lifetime?
I mean, guys.
In Caleb's unborn child's lifetime.
John, you have already lived through the era. You have already lived through the era where the Ivy League stopped being the dominant football conference. There was a time when the Ivy League was the SEC.
Yeah, I know. And General Neyland's defense has shut out a lot of opponents too. I can remember some of those shutouts. But I think what they want I think what the SEC and Big Ten want, they want a super conference without calling it a super conference.
Right. They don't want to call
Exactly.
it.
They
Yes,
want
they
to
don't
say,
want to call
we're
it the
the
SC.
SEC. Yeah, I just think that way they keep their jobs. It's the whole thing when you start talking about, well, the SEC is going to get 8 buys to the championship game. The other conferences don't get by. The SEC will have 5 automatic qualifiers. It's slanted toward the SEC and Big Ten. And I don't know if they'll turn on one another eventually. I could see that possibly occurring. Um, but so I think they have it. I think the way they have it, where they're headed right now, maybe temporarily, but this would be ideal for them. They can set up, hey, we're all about the growth of college football and the game itself. And we want to be fair to everybody. So we'll let them play in our super conferences, in our super conference. But they won't be able to advance as far or with as many in the playoff.
Yeah, the relegation thing. Portions of today's tough question brought to you by our friends at Boundless Moving. From a 2-hour minimum to turnkey operations, they have you covered. That's who I use. Their motto: personal service without limits. It's not just a tagline, it's part of who they are. It's in their DNA. In North Carolina as well. Boundless Moving. Give them a call, get a quote, do yourself a favor. So we can go ahead and say Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. But which one of, I'm going to call them the real schools, should be concerned about a free flowing NIL? The show represented by Banks and Jones. The one established program that should be worried about this free flowing NIL era is Ole Miss. Because if they don't have a Lane Kiffin, John, I want to start with you, and then Caleb, I want to get your take. If they don't have a Lane Kiffin that's going to work boosters tirelessly, that's going to work transfers tirelessly, then I'm not sure there's enough money to keep them at an upper level. So I wanted to pick one team that wasn't a state, that wasn't an addition, that wasn't Vanderbilt. John, what do you think of Ole Miss?
Oh yeah, if you look at the history of Ole Miss, certainly that's true. Um, I mean, it's had a few ups, but it's had a lot of downs, and you can go back to in its heyday. Johnny Vaught was a coach in the late '50s, early '60s. Um, it was a power. It hasn't been that since, but Lane Kiffin has revived it and done more than I thought anybody could there. But I think that's true. It's not just true of Ole Miss. It's true of a lot of schools. It may mean
That
more.
have
The
been
coach,
that have been reinvigorated.
yeah. I mean, the coach is so important because that changes everything. If you have a coach you believe in, but if you don't have a coach at Alabama, a coach that you believe in, the revenue, the NIL money will slow down. You want to, is it a good investment or a bad investment? So, yeah, I think it matters more to a place like Ole Miss, but that's where, so Ole Miss probably can't pay Lane Kiffin enough because he means so much. When you talk about most valuable coach in the SEC, you can make a strong case that it's Lane Kiffin.
Yep.
Yeah.
Elias says the NIL stuff, Caleb, I want to get to you. The NIL stuff really benefits schools that don't have major competitors in their market, such as a Knoxville would be a prime example, Caleb. I think that is Knoxville's. It's a Tennessee one-horse town. We all know that.
Yeah, well, it's location is still a thing in recruiting. I will say that, having still covering it a little bit. So it's why, to me, there are a couple of schools. LSU and Ohio State really are the two schools where, I mean, I think any of us three could coach those schools and maybe win a national championship over 5 years and not have to do anything that special because you can just talent falls into your backyard at those two schools. Every other
I know
school,
John and I could have won an SEC title in Atlanta in December of 2001. I'm aware of that.
Would you
Well-
would you have Would you have coached the defense or the offense in that game? And which unit would have left me with, Dave?
You can have it. It's called Squeeze the Rock and Stop the Draw. That's what it's called.
Oh my gosh, I saw it's so funny y'all say that because I actually saw on the there's an SEC Rewind segment on that game, and Jimmy Hyams of all people is on it because Nick Saban tried to very nicely in a Nick Saban way say, I was shocked at how incompetent Tennessee's coaching staff was. That's not what he said. He said, we had a change of pace and they just weren't prepared for our new offense. And they come right to Jimmy, and Jimmy's like, it's a quarterback draw. How much adjustment do you have to do to prepare for a quarterback draw?
Yeah, I mean, it catches you off guard one time, but then after that,
maybe twice, maybe twice, but not the third time.